My name is Tara. I'm 31 years old, and 3 weeks ago, at my father's retirement party in front of 62 people, a buffet table of catered food he definitely couldn't afford, and a slideshow of photos I wasn't in, my uncle grabbed the microphone after the toasts and told the room that the best thing I ever did for the family was stay out of the way. He meant it as a joke. Some people laughed. I didn't leave. I didn't cry. I sat at the round table near the kitchen pass-through, the one where they'd seated me next to my father's golf buddy, and a second cousin who kept asking me if I was still doing that little website thing, and I made a decision that had been forming for about 6 years and just needed that exact moment to finish hardening. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Because this story doesn't start at a country club banquet room in Scottsdale, Arizona. It starts in a strip mall accounting office in Mesa, when I was 24 years old and my uncle looked me in the eyes and told me I was lucky he was willing to take a chance on someone like me, my father's family. The Branford name. My grandfather, Dale Branford, built Branford Tax and Financial Services out of a 2-room office and a second-hand adding machine in 1978. By the time I was born, it had 3 locations across the East Valley, a staff of 11, and a client roster that included some of the oldest small businesses in Chandler and Gilbert. My father, Ted, ran the Mesa location. My uncle, Glenn, ran the others. We weren't wealthy exactly. We were comfortable in that particular Arizona way. A 4-bedroom house in a good school district, a timeshare in Sedona, nobody used. A pool that my father spent every Saturday maintaining himself because he said it built character. My mother left when I was 9. She and my father had what he called an incompatibility of ambitions, which I later understood to mean she wanted more than a strip mall and a timeshare, and he couldn't imagine why. She moved to Portland and we talked on the phone every Sunday until the calls got shorter, and then stopped. After she left, it was just me and my father and, in every practical sense, my uncle Glenn. Glenn was the kind of man who filled a room and made sure you knew he was doing it. Loud laugh. Firm handshake. He coached my cousin Derek's soccer teams, attended every school play, took the family to Disneyland every other summer. My father was quieter, more careful, more interested in accuracy than impression. Glenn made the money. My father kept the books clean. They needed each other, but only one of them seemed to know that. Derek was 3 years older than me and had known since approximately the 6th grade that he would take over Branford Financial. This was not discussed. It was simply understood, the way some things in families are. Not stated because they don't need to be. I was smart, I was good with numbers. I had graduated near the top of my accounting program at Arizona State. And when I came to Glenn asking to join the firm, he looked at me across his desk and said what he said. Lucky he was willing to take a chance. I took the job. I told myself it was temporary. It was not. For 4 years I worked at the Mesa location, which meant working for my father, which meant being invisible in a new and particular way. My father loved me. I believe that fully. But he had also spent my entire life apologizing for my existence in Glenn's presence, shrinking himself and by extension me, until it was just the natural shape of things. I was good at the work. Our clients liked me. I caught 3 significant errors in client filings in my first year that would have triggered audits. Glenn's response when my father mentioned it at a family dinner was to say, "That's what we pay her for." There is a specific kind of exhaustion that comes from doing excellent work for people who have already decided you're unremarkable. I left at 28. I didn't announce it. I didn't make a scene. I gave 4 weeks' notice, transferred my client files cleanly, and moved into a converted loft in the Arts District in Phoenix with $18,400 in savings, a laptop, and a very clear idea of what I wanted to build. The idea had started 2 years earlier when a client, a woman named Opal, who ran a small catering company out of Tempe, had asked me, half joking, if I ever did consulting on the side. She had a friend who needed help setting up bookkeeping for a new restaurant. I said yes. I stayed late 3 Tuesdays in a row working on it at the kitchen table in my apartment. The friend referred someone else, and then someone else. By the time I left the firm, I had 11 private clients. I want to pause here and be precise about what I built, because the details matter and I am an accountant, and I believe in the details. I registered Meridian Advisory Group LLC in the state of Arizona in January of my 29th year. I specialized in financial operations, consulting for small and mid-sized food and beverage businesses, restaurants, catering companies, food trucks with actual growth ambitions. I kept my name entirely off the public-facing materials for the first 2 years. No LinkedIn presence under the company name. No press mentions. All contracts routed through the company and through my attorney, a woman named Bethany Crane, who charged a fair rate and asked exactly the right questions. Why the secrecy? I'd watched my entire life what happened when the Branford family caught wind of something. They didn't steal, exactly. They absorbed. They found a way to make your thing into a conversation about them. My uncle would have called 3 of my clients personally to introduce himself. My cousin Derek would have asked, sincerely and without any awareness of the problem, if I needed his help scaling. I did not want their help. I wanted to see what I could build in a room they didn't know existed. By 30, Meridian had 23 active clients, a part-time operations manager I'd hired named Bex, an annual revenue of $340,000. By 31, we were at $610,000, with 4 full-time employees and an office with actual walls and a conference table I bought, used from a hotel renovation sale in Tempe for $200, and refinished myself over a long weekend. Here is the part that still makes me laugh when I tell it. 8 months before my father's retirement party, my cousin Derek called me. Not to catch up. Derek didn't really do catch-up calls. He called because his father, my Uncle Glenn, was looking to bring in outside consulting for a client portfolio restructuring at Brantford Financial, something about a new software system they were migrating to, and 3 clients who were threatening to leave during the transition. He'd gotten Meridian's name from a colleague. Did I know anything about them? He asked. Were they good? I told him Meridian had a strong reputation for exactly that kind of transition work. He said great. He'd reach out. My Uncle Glenn signed a consulting contract with Meridian Advisory Group 3 weeks later. He spoke with Bex for most of the intake process. He never asked who owned the company. It did not occur to him that someone he knew might have built something without his awareness. We did good work for Brantford Financial. The 3 clients stayed. The migrations was clean. My uncle sent Bex a very nice email about it. Bex forwarded it to me. I printed it out and put it in a folder. My aunt, Glenn's wife, a woman named Rosie, who has always been kinder to me than she needed to be, called me 2 months before the retirement party and warned me. Your uncle has been telling people you do freelance tax work, she said carefully, that you're doing okay but you've been a little lost since you left the firm. I thanked her. I told her I'd be fine. I went to the party because my father asked me to. And because he'd spent 31 years working somewhere that undervalued him too, just more quietly, and I wanted to be there when someone finally said something good about him. The party was at the Scottsdale location of a country club that Glenn belonged to, white tablecloths, a DJ who played soft classic rock, a slideshow of my father's career that had been assembled, clearly by Glenn, and featured Glenn in approximately 40% of the photos. I wore a dark blue dress I'd bought in December and hadn't had occasion to wear yet. Simple. Good fabric. My mother had sent me, inexplicably and without a card, a pair of pearl earrings for my 30th birthday. And I wore them. I looked like what I was. A woman who had quietly outgrown the room she was standing in and knew it. My uncle intercepted me near the drink station during cocktail hour. Tara. He said my name the way he always had, like it was mildly surprising I was still around. Your dad said you're doing some consulting work. How's that going? I told him it was going really well. He nodded with exactly the expression of someone who doesn't believe you, but is too polite to say so. Good, good. Let me know if you ever want to come back to the firm. We could always use another hand. I smiled. Dinner was fine. My father gave a short speech that was genuinely moving, if you knew him well enough to understand what he was not saying. Then the toasts started. Glenn went first, naturally. He talked about 30 years of partnership, about the Brantford legacy, about Derek being ready to carry it forward. He talked about my father the way you talk about a reliable car. Dependable, steady, never gave us any trouble. Then, wrapping up, he looked across the room at me. Ted's daughter Tara is here tonight. He said it warmly enough. The room turned. Tara went out on her own a few years back, independent type. He smiled. Doing some freelance work, figuring things out. A small, affectionate shrug. We're proud of her in her own way. Some people smiled. I looked at my father. He was looking at his water glass. I counted to 4. Then I stood up, walked to the small wireless mic that the DJ had set up for the toasts and picked it up. The room noticed immediately. I'd like to say something, I said. My voice was level. This is the part I want you to hold on to. My voice was completely level. Dad, congratulations, 30 years. That's real, and you should be proud of it. I looked at him and I meant it. I turned to the room. My uncle just told you I'm figuring things out. I want to be honest about what that means. I looked at Glenn. He was very still. The consulting firm that Brantford Financial hired 8 months ago to manage your client migration. The one Derek reached out to, the one Glenn sent a letter of commendation to in March. That's my company. I built it. I own it. Meridian Advisory Group. We did $610,000 in revenue last year, and we're on track to cross $800,000 by December. The room did not make a sound. I'm not saying this to embarrass anyone. I kept my voice even. I'm saying it because I've been sitting in this family for 31 years being described as someone who is figuring things out, and I think it's time the description matched the reality. I set the microphone back in the stand. I picked up my clutch and I walked toward the exit, and the only sound in that entire room was my heels on the hardwood floor near the entryway. I sat in my car in the parking lot for 22 minutes. Not crying, just breathing. The specific way you breathe when something has been true for a long time and you finally said it out loud and the air feels different. I want to step out of the story for a moment and say something directly to you. If you have ever been the one they describe as figuring it out while you are quietly, carefully building something real, this is for you. If you have sat at the family table and been the footnote while someone else was the headline, and you kept going anyway, I see that. I know what that costs. Drop a comment. Tell me if you've ever had to say the truth in a room that had agreed on a different version of you. I read all of them. Now, what happened after I drove home that night is the part that I didn't see coming. 3 days later, my Aunt Rosie called. She wasn't calling to talk about the party. Tara, she said, there's something you should know. And I've been holding it for a while because I didn't know if it was my place. But after the other night, she paused. I think you should know. When I left the firm, 2 of the clients I had managed most closely had asked to follow me. They liked working with me. They had my personal email. They reached out. I had referred them to Meridian. I had disclosed this to my father, in writing, before I left, and there was no non-solicitation agreement in place. My uncle had told those clients that I had left the firm due to performance issues. He had told them specifically. And Rosie had heard this directly, at a dinner, 2 months after I left. That I had made filing errors that had created problems for their accounts, and that while the family wished me well, they couldn't professionally recommend my new work. Both clients had stayed with the firm. Both had declined to follow me. I sat with that for a long time. I called Bethany the next morning. What she found over the following 2 weeks was this. There were 3 other former clients from my time at the Mesa office who had inquired about following me when I left. All 3 had received a variation of the same story. One of them, a woman named Opal, the one who had first asked me about consulting, the one who had started everything, had specifically called my father to ask about the performance issues she'd heard about. My father had not corrected the story. I don't know what to do with that, even now. I think he believed he was protecting the family. I think he had spent so long protecting the family that he couldn't see how far outside it I'd been placed. Bethany sent a formal letter to Branford Financial on Meridian's behalf. It documented the specific business defamation and outlined what a civil suit would look like. No filing was made. No court date was set. What happened instead, within 10 days, was that my Uncle Glenn called me directly for the first time in 2 years. He didn't apologize. I want to be honest about that. What he did was talk. Carefully, precisely, in the way of someone who has recently spoken with their own attorney. About a misunderstanding, about how things had been communicated, about family and legacy, and what my grandfather would have wanted. I let him talk. When he finished, I told him that Meridian would not be pursuing litigation. That I had no interest in spending years in a courtroom with his family. That what I wanted, which was for the record to be corrected with those clients directly, and in writing, I expected to happen by the end of the month. It did. Opal, the caterer from Tempe who had started everything, became a Meridian client in April. My cousin Derek called me 6 weeks after the party. He'd found out the full picture by then, who owned Meridian, what had happened with the client defamation, what Glenn had done. He was quiet on the phone for a long time. I didn't know about the clients, he said, about what he told them. I know, I'm not sure what to do with that. Neither am I told him. We talked for almost an hour. It wasn't easy. It was awkward and honest, and there were long silences. And at one point Derek said, I'm sorry, in a way that sounded like he was apologizing for more than the phone call. I believed him. Derek isn't cruel. He'd just been standing in the sun his whole life. And had never noticed there was a shadow until someone told him where it was falling. We're figuring out what a relationship looks like now. I don't know if we'll get there. My father and I had lunch in late April, at a diner in Mesa we used to go to when I was in high school. He ordered the same thing he always ordered. He looked older in a way I wasn't prepared for. We talked about everything except what we needed to talk about. And then, near the end, with the check sitting there between us, he said, I should have said something when those clients called. I should have told them the truth. I looked at him. I know, I said. I'm sorry, Tara Bird. He had a nickname for me when I was small. I hadn't heard it in years. It caught me off guard more than anything else in that entire month. I reached across the table and I held his hand for a minute. We didn't say anything else. Sometimes there isn't anything else to say. My Uncle Glenn has not contacted me since the call with Bethany's resolution. Through Derek, I've heard he described the party moment as me causing a scene. That I'd staged it, that it was calculated. Maybe it was. I've turned that over a lot. Here's what I've come to. I spent 6 years building something real, quietly and carefully, while the people who should have believed in me told anyone who asked that I was still figuring things out. I tried for 6 years to let the work speak. I kept my head down. I corrected his narrative privately, through achievement, through patience. It didn't land. It doesn't always. Sometimes the truth needs to be said in a room. Today, Meridian Advisory Group has 7 full-time employees. We just brought on our largest client to date, a regional restaurant group with 14 locations across Arizona and New Mexico. Bex runs operations. I run strategy. We have an actual office with actual plants. that I remember to water about 60% of the time, which I consider a success. I have a therapist I started seeing last year, a man named Dr. Osi, who told me in our third session that anger held past its useful point becomes a story you tell yourself about why you can't move. I've thought about that almost every week since. I keep a photo on my desk. It's from the summer I was 11 years old. My father and I at the Mesa swap meet, both of us squinting into the sun, him holding a snow cone he'd bought me, and looking genuinely happy in the uncomplicated way people look happy before things get complicated. I love that photo. It reminds me that the person who failed me and the person who loves me are the same person, and that's something I'm allowed to grieve without having to resolve it. My grandfather built something from a 2-room office and a second-hand adding machine. I know what that takes. I know how many hours, how many early mornings, how many phone calls where you're not sure if the other person is going to say yes. I built something too. No one handed it to me. No one made room for me at the table, so I bought my own table, used $200, refinished it myself over a long weekend, and I put it in an office with windows that face east, and every morning the light comes through and lands exactly where I'm sitting, and I think, this is mine. I made this. Nobody's version of me built this. I did. I'm not angry at my family. I mean that. Anger is expensive and I'm an accountant. I know what things cost and I know when to stop spending. What I have instead is clarity. About what I built. About who I am when no one's watching. About the kind of people I let close and the kind I love from a careful, honest distance. Not as punishment, not as a wall, but as an acknowledgement that I know my own value now, and I'm not negotiating it anymore. If you're watching this from a family that always had a quieter room for you, a further table, a smaller description, hear me when I say this. You are not what they summarized you as. You are not the footnote version. You are not still figuring it out. You figured it out. You just did it somewhere they weren't looking. Until next time, this is Tara. And I'm finally telling the whole story.